Hello, everyone. So how is the conference going for everyone?
Yeah.
Yes? All right, so show of hands, my topic today, talking about what's next for functional QA managers. Show of hands, how many QA managers we got in the room? Coordinators or someone in a QA leadership level? All right. I need participation just as much as I'm going to be talking to people. I don't do good at talking down to slides. I like talking the interaction. I'm bringing up points. So for me, I've been a QA manager, director for, 17 years. I decided I was burned out for a while of arguing with development managers. And do I have any developers here? No. Project managers? Good, all right. All right. I can't promise that you're going to be safe. All right. I just got burned out from doing that. How many people get burned out just the same argument over and over again? So I have one, I get to go back to a job tomorrow where the product owner decided to cut the regression testing time that we really need by 2 weeks. So that's tomorrow. So I want to stay here. I'd rather just sit and talk can we talk for like a day? I just want to forget all about that. But I left to work for a test automation vendor. And I got to work with people. So I worked for 2 different test automation vendors in sales, which was interesting, right? We have good releases all the time. But in sales, I had a great month. And then the next day is the first of the month. And then nothing was good. So it was all starting from scratch. But I got to talk to a lot of QA managers, a lot of QA people talking about their environment, their QA environment. And I got to hear a lot. For the last 3 years, the interaction I've had with the community was just been awesome. So I thought I'd share this because it's something that affects me as well. How many people have thought about this whole thing with Agile? Not that Agile's new, but what's the role of QA managers? Right? Who's got some concerns about where their career longevity as a traditional QA manager would go? Yes? So? Well, I have some topics to talk about where I've heard from the community of where people are going. And I'd be interested to hear on each one of these slides. I'm going to ask people if you're doing things like this. And as I'm presenting, I'd love for you to share your feedback as well. Is that a deal? All right. So, the agenda, we're going to talk about the evolution of test and quality ownership. 8 areas for QA managers to focus on. It's not to say that it's going to be in just one given area, but what are different areas that they can work on besides traditional test management? Process-oriented or technically oriented roles. And finally, a recap. All right. How many people are doing Agile? Who's not? How about this? Who's not doing Agile? All right. So, any plans for those who had the hands up doing waterfall? By the way, I commend you. Bravo. That's all right. No one. Who's doing Agile, including test-driven development? I can tell you, I speak at almost every conference there is. I ask, how many people are doing Agile? All the hands go up. How many people are doing including test-driven development? All the hands down. How many people are doing something Agile-ish? All the hands, there you go, there we go. And one manager told me, he said, I need to patent this term. We decided to call it a fragile methodology. I'm like, excellent. I'm like, and I had my VP of sales on the phone, and I'm busting a gut laughing. He doesn't understand why I'm laughing my tail off, but how's this considered? So traditionally, what do we have? Is this pretty typical in an organization? You got your project manager, you got your dev leaders, business analysts, and testers. Generally speaking, you may have a configuration manager, you may have a release manager, you may have some UAT participants, but by and large, is this pretty familiar in most organizations? Well, where have people gone? Where have these roles gone? In a waterfall world, all of these contributed to the testing definition, right? So we would have test strategy reviews, we'd have test scenario reviews, however you would kind of organize that, but you got buy-in from your stakeholder early on before you started writing your test cases as a team. But now look at this. What is this saying about the Agile world? How many people have it where the product owners really have owned the testing tasks for the testers assigned to their team? No one? Well, then my session's over. No, it's one of those where you've seen that a lot of product owners are trying to take ownership of the test. And I'd be interested in hearing some feedback where to say, you decided as a team. right? So as that Scrum team or that product team, you're deciding that what the quality content is, what the test criteria is, and what are the test acceptance criteria is all about. So you're seeing this a lot. I'm seeing this a lot from the Scrum team's ownership of that. So project managers, where have they gone in a new world of Agile? A lot of them have converted to Scrum Masters, right? Seems like a pretty easy transition. What about business analysts? A lot of them have converted into product owners. They work closely with the business, so that seems like a fairly easy transition. So far, have you heard anything where Scrum Masters, product owners from the testing world, are we there yet? Not quite. Development managers, they still own the IDE, they still own the technology. So if there's any new kind of solutions being looked at, it's not necessarily going to be a product team, it's going to be usually the development team that's working on this. But what about the testing managers? What about test leaders? Where have they gone? So now as a test manager, I have embedded QA on each of the product teams. So each of these Scrum teams have embedded QA. What's my job? Am I really looking at the testing tasks each and every time? No. How many people are? As a test manager, how many times are you really looking at the testing deliverables that your team is doing? Compared to what the product owner is doing? So how does that compare or contrast with the product owner? No? Okay. No, that's fair enough. But that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing it. They may be engaged, they may not. So where are we at with trying to own this? I mean, as of right now, there was a couple jobs where I felt like my main responsibility was to approve timesheets and to approve time off and there. So, and I managed kind of like our test management solution. But other than that, when I tried to go in, all right, what about the scenario reviews for this? No, Jim, we got it. We're doing this as part of our own sprint review. We have this. So I go over to this product team. I'm like, I don't want to say being nudged out, but it's not being as inclusive. The test manager role was not as inclusive in the product teams as it was. And has anyone applied for any test manager jobs lately? Anyone looked at any kind of test leadership or test management jobs? Yes? I don't care where you go across the country. If you see it, the amount of hands-on that they're asking for is far more than it ever was before. Far more. Because I was in the market, so I was looking, I'm like, must be hands-on, must be hands-on, must be hands-on. I'm like, but a lot of test managers, they grew their career into that respect that they came from a testing ranks, maybe moved into test management, and haven't been hands-on in, not that they couldn't be, but they're not there. So here it's asking for people to be test managers who are hands-on, right? How many times do you see development managers ask to be, we want you to be a development manager but still write code? I don't see it much, right? So in a new world, the project manager, they're still contributing to the definition. So now we're all still contributing to the definition, but if you look at this Agile role, we're just helping contribute as opposed to owning it. This is a big thing, right? We don't own that anymore. It's now been decentralized across the Scrum teams and the product teams. So we've got to figure out where can we contribute. All right, so the 8 areas I have for focus between process and technical. Well, that's bright. Process owner for quality and test guidelines. As we get into each one of these slides, I'm going to ask you guys who is doing this as a regular basis as part of your team, because I'd like your feedback as some of that. Agile Planning Tool process owner. These are gaps that I've seen when I've asked a lot of questions to prospective customers when I was on the sales side to see where's the gaps in where could QA managers start to go along. Release manager. How many, who left? Because that's kind of a funny thing. Is release management, who feels like release management is dead with Agile? Raise your hand. I kind of do. Who feels like it's very much alive? So I'd be definitely interested in some feedback because I think the ways of traditional test management has changed, obviously. And trying to get that into, how that factors into each one of the scrums and each one of the sprints is a challenge. Product owner for test automation. This is a big one and probably one of my favorites. Test management administration. All right, we could do that. Operational manager of automation and performance. Performance test strategist. And finally, on security. So, who feels like they're doing each one of these? Is anyone? I hope not. All of them? Do you want to come up here and present with me?
Part of that is I just moved into a new role in the company, so we're doing this Agile shift as part of that. So this is part of what we're looking at is these roles. And like Theo for the automation team, that was one of the first teams we had.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is an interesting, it's an interesting kind of world we're moving to. All right, so process-oriented role. Who is the process owner for the quality and test deliverables for the organization? All right, so I'm going to call on you guys a little bit. I guess you guys, you didn't realize that you're going to be presenting as part of this too. Exactly, see, it'll be all right. All right, what are the highest attributes and qualities of test cases that we could be doing? Governance, expansion. So when we're writing, give me a typical breakdown when you're writing your team is writing a test case for a given story. Or if you're writing one for a story. What are you thinking about? Whatever I need to do to write that test for that story. You're not thinking about other testing types or maybe some of the quality deliverable, are you? I mean, you're writing to make sure that you're writing that test criteria for that story. True or false? True? All right, so are we looking at all the different testing types that we had before? Probably not. Not as much as we could be. So, I'm saying for the test managers to come in and give some governance to this. That we're writing with starting endpoints. Because I'll tell you, I feel that I've been looking at some customers and working on as a consultant or working on the sales side, even my own team, the quality of our test cases I feel like have gone down. And I'm not blaming Agile for this, but I'm saying I feel like they're writing it quicker to get it done and make sure it's kind of shoehorned in. Does anyone feel that way? That some of the quality of the test cases that they're seeing is not as high as it was? Do we kind of feel that? Or do you feel it's higher? I think, again, this is just my experience. So if it's higher, I'd love to hear what you're doing to help make it higher than what it was previously in Waterfall.
It depends how often like we run. It was just like a smoke test. They wanted to do it very rapidly, so you just get through all these tests. There's some things like a regression that comes over and over again. That's what I hand off to a lot of people. They have to make this test very clear for one consumer. Great
point. Yes, but what if it's part of just one story? It's just going to be one story and may not be exactly. And if someone had to come in on top of that and execute that, it's like, what did you mean by that? Even now, we have developers helping out sometimes with our regression tests. And the developers, so that's an awfully expensive tester. They're going to the testing teams like, what did you mean by this regression test? What did you mean by this step? And it's because it's pretty clear, but it's clear to the person who wrote that. Because how many testers are embedded on one team? 1, 2? Right? So they're dedicated on their own stories, and they're not thinking that there's other people on top of that. So could a test manager come in there and make sure that it's clear for the entire team? Because so even though that tester is embedded in that team, well, guess what? If that person leaves, they're coming right back to the test manager and say, who do you got to put on this? I don't know. But yet you're responsible to make sure that those deliverables are good. That's a given. I mean, we've been talking about that for a while, but just clear, I had to say it, make sure that anyone can execute it. But a modular approach, this is the key thing. I'm submitting abstracts to some of the better software conferences and some other conferences to say, my topic, Agile and automation don't work well together. I can't wait. How many people are using Agile? And do you know how many pissed off people I'm going to get at that session, ready to be combative? I can't wait. I mean, I'm hoping someone will take that on because it's not just, it's a spicy enough topic not to say that, here, Agile and automation work great together. No, they work bad together if you don't follow some of these principles. So it's a kind of a little different play on it. But how many people are hardcore dedicated automation with their sprints? All right, so tell me about it.
We're using behavior-driven development, so we use
Gherkin,
Uh,
little cucumber,
yeah. Yeah, we use SpecFlow, so
okay.
working in .NET, but it allows us to have a modular library so that we can, once we built out an automation framework that has a bigger library, some of our less technical testers can come in and just write automated tests with Gherkin and not have to write any code because we already have all the libraries.
Does that substitute the manual test that they do?
Well, for our core services, we don't have any manual testing right
Okay.
now. So,
How many people are for sprints or during them are doing automation and manual tests? Slightly a pain? Wouldn't it be nice to not even write a manual test anymore? That's what I'm driving to, at least with my organization, that we don't have to write a single manual test case ever again. That we do it with automation. And if we need to execute it manually, I'm not saying that there could be something that broke with the automation. We could just read it from the automated script and use that as the guidelines. That's what I'm trying to get to. But again, how many organizations have had 1,000 or more test cases? Have those been written with automation in mind? You don't even have to raise your hand? No. Right? It just hasn't been. So now we're trying to, they're saying, oh, just go do the regression test. I'm like, there's 1,000 of them. And we don't even know what's redundant, what's not. So it's just it's a pain.
and to go off of that too, also with Gherkin stuff, to get into Gherkin, we had to throw all our manual stuff away.
Oh, it's a completely different world.
Can't transfer that over very well.
But that's fantastic. I actually applaud you on that because it is a whole change. It is a whole mind shift. And it makes you think differently. Instead of just writing the same test case, let me tweak my test case and throw it over to the automation team. Let me tweak this, and still keeping some bad habits. You have no choice but to kind of adopt new habits.
Right.
Yep. So what about an appendix? I would love if someone helped with this. If a test manager would help put an appendix together. How many times have you tried picking up test cases and it's using some kind of acronym that you have no idea? Make sure you do, the ABC on DEF for GHI. Really? Okay. But JKL has to be included also. Test data, right? We harp on our developers for years not to hard code test data. Why are we? So these are some of the things that the test manager can make sure they're governing. And on top of that, just the various testing types. You got negative, equivalent class, component exploratory, all this. We're not really factoring that into the sprints. Can anyone say that they really are? Because I know I can. You are really?
Why not?
Well, you know what? The time. I think the time. Are people working on traditional 2-week sprints? Anyone longer? Anyone shorter? Shorter? 1 week. So you should be able. In 1 week, you can write all this and get all that done, right? And I'm sure the builds are never past time, right? There's never any slippage in a build. All right. What about the Agile Planning tool? So who's using something like the Rally, version 1, TFS, Jira? All those? All right. So who's really managing the governance of that? Are they managing the entire repository? Okay. So the Scrum Masters, but who's an organization where they're not really doing that? So I've had a couple of people, and I'd like you to kind of chime in on some of these points. But I haven't seen it really governed well. Not too many organizations. If I can, I'm actually at an organization now for the first time that, yes, it is being governed pretty well. But prior to that, as far as what the stories, the true governance of all of the Agile stories, no. So let's look at these. Break these down a little bit. What's the quality criteria? Yes, the product owners, the Scrum Masters, they own this. But the quality managers can seriously help with the governance, right? If that's something to say, if we partner with the Scrum Masters or the product owners to say, we can help govern this as well, boy, I think they're going to be very much, I can't see them saying no. What's the guidelines for a story? How many times have stories had to been reworked? I'm talking about prior to going into test. that you're updating a story, it's updating a story, it's updating a story, and then, even still, it moves along, and then by the time it gets into tests, it's day 8 of the sprint. Anyone seen that scenario? So what are the things that you're doing to try to prevent that?
Better story construction to start.
Right? I mean, the advent of Agile, it still doesn't change from waterfall in the fact that it's still a quality requirement. That doesn't change. Writing something that's high quality doesn't change. I always felt like one of the biggest falls of waterfall was change management. If you had a really good project manager who could do change management like nobody's business, I think waterfall could have been better. I like Agile better, but waterfall could have been a stronger life cycle. But we just didn't handle change management well, thus the advent of some of the Agile world. Is there a quality review for the defects reported? So does it have steps to reproduce? Does it have all of this? Are we governing to make sure it's got everything clear that we need to? What about the test results? How many people do we say it just passed, it just failed? And that's it, right? We're not looking at does it have a screenshot? If you're in a regulatory environment, anyone in a regulatory environment where test results are like king? How many people are audited? Yes? So test results are king. I passed this. Is that going to fly with the auditors?
The DoD will not accept that.
And on top of that, you got external. So we had external auditors from one of the big 5. So in case anyone's working for that, and they're going through my test cases, and I'm like having to bite my tongue. I'm like, they're making $350 an hour, and they're saying you have on here the drop down for city, San Francisco, but you didn't pick the state. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think my tester missed, but that should be California. Okay, because it wasn't clear on there, and I'm just like, you're making $350 an hour as an auditor to audit my test cases, and you're finding things that I don't have a state picked for San Francisco. Okay, that one of my testers. So I had to go back to my tester and say, can you please add a line in here? It was an audit finding. But it was brutal. So, but why can't we do this? Why can't we jump into the Agile world where we're helping kind of administer some of that from a test perspective? We can. And this is something that's going to be welcomed, but I'm talking about for all of the teams. So in addition to us approving our team's timesheets and vacation time and work from home requests, there's other things we can do, and none of these are all full-time jobs in and of itself. This could be, but you never know. These are things that we could start doing.
Yeah, the test results can have much more than the green dot, but it's very involved. I do want to talk later about this. Is kind of what I mean, a lot more information.
Okay. So, what about release management? So, who is doing release management as part of their job? Who thinks it's a gap? So I'm going to be calling on you on this. You ready to present with me? One slide, and then you can go back. Development, testing, production. So release management through here. So defining what the release policy is. We don't go to production unless this. We don't go to staging unless this. So the whole concept is, anyone using staged environments in their Agile world? Or we have a test environment, you have a staging environment that you're deploying to, and you're having various sprints that are talking about that. But how are you working with the product owners? I'd like some feedback on this, truly. How are you working with the product owners to talk about when you release something from test to staging? Who raised their hand that they have the staging environment? So, sir, tell me what you're doing.
So, every Tuesday we have like a cutoff time, and whatever makes the train will go to staging and gets to production. So we don't wait for the stories to be done, but we
Okay.
have a timeline set that after this, it will get merged into master. And from the release time, it gets promoted to staging and then
All right, so you have it as a weekly process outside of your sprints.
you can say that.
Okay. That's a neat way to do it. And that way, and you have so it's an external process that you have the release policies already defined for what makes it, and if it doesn't make that cutoff, it's got to make it for this given criteria.
Yeah, so,
Else it's got to go for the next one. Okay.
Management and QA work together on that. So they define the policy.
Cool. I like it. Anyone else have something?
So our staging environments, you've got the output of the build system, and then the product team using the product, and then the whole company, then external users that take pre-release builds in the entire market. So those are our stages. And the actual gating of that from the Uber kind of view, the whole product view,
right,
is really just an issue database. And so we have issues that have been reported either from the users or from the product team. And if they're tagged a certain way, then they're blocking the movement to the next stage. And what that does is that puts the construction of how we assess criteria down low, right? Or near where it's collected, right? If a customer's reporting something that's really severe from like product team usage, it gets initially flagged as blocking until someone says, no, it's actually not as important, move it down. If the product team has something like every week we run this set of tests, and this particular test, if there is a certain fail rate, it flags an issue that we say we can't go forward until it goes. So the actual criteria gets spread out to more local control, and we just use this very high level metadata of, look, if it's an issue that has the right keyword, it's going to block the next rank.
And that is a great way for QA managers to kind of help provide governance and oversight to it. Yes. Yes, sir.
I have a question about release scheduling and trying to line up to sprints. I've seen that happen in different organizations I've been in, and it doesn't last very long. There's always someone with dev or QA or
Yeah.
So it never seems to work out on a regular 2-week cadence or whatever, trying to skip sprint schedule that people have set up. Is that fairly common to do that?
And it's that wonderful word. It's now the thing. Oh, don't worry. Let's still meet our schedule, but let's accumulate what? Technical debt. So just put it in the backlog, and we'll get to it. Yeah, I mean yeah. I love that technical debt word. It's just like, yeah, let's just put it. We know that it's technical debt. It sounds nice, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like it's that horrid. It doesn't sound like it's necessarily horrid, but it's got a lot of nice words.
I disagree with that statement.
You do? Okay.
I'm a quality analyst, basically from an organization that's acting as the customer,
Okay.
because, like I mentioned earlier, we have data that we're not willing to share with our vendors, so we do our own routing testing. Technical debt is a shortfall for our members.
Oh, it's brutal. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying
Maybe warm and fuzzy on the dev side, round two it someday we'll address it.
I'm saying that the term, and it's like it doesn't sound. Oh, it sounds like that, but yet it's just this. It's lipstick on a pig. And as soon as you unpeel that, then you're like, look at all this debt we have, and then we measure our velocity. It's like we've got a lot of stuff we need to work on that we're not doing. So, release planning, software design, build release. I just want to go through these a little quicker. Again, we're doing some of this rollout plan for release management. We have a release plan at the very beginning. So as that gentleman in the back was saying, yes, we have a release plan. Is that pretty common? You have a release plan, and then you're figuring out how many sprints that you need that's going to deliver on this given release, and the features that are going to be carved out. But still, in that overall release plan, there's still criteria, and if that's outside of the realm of Agile, cool. If not, but that's still something that the QA manager can govern. A lot of organizations, you see QA and release management kind of tied together. So this is saying, why not make sure, put the QA manager as part of it as a release manager, to make sure, not necessarily governing each sprint, but each sprint as it goes along for what it means to deploying to the higher level environments. So you got all this, you're ready for staging? Well, sprint 3, you didn't handle this well in sprint 3. I can't let you deploy to the staging environment because of this. Sprint 5. So you're not governing the sprints, but you're governing the release. Release accepted, and finally, implementation, and then all these wonderful things. So working with developers maybe on putting the implementation plan together. Product owner for test automation. Who is this? Who's doing a product owner role for automation? Okay. How many people have automation in their environment? All right. And I don't even care necessarily about what kind of percentages you're working on right now. I'm going to get anywhere from 1% to 75%, maybe 80% in this room. So that's just the given. But if they're not deployed on specific teams, who's managing the work? How many people have embedded automation engineers on sprint teams? How many have this as part of automation specialists as part of an operational team? So the first thing I did in an organization as a consultant that I'm working at now, I took all of the automation engineers, I pulled them all off. I pulled them all off of the embedded teams because their direction, first of all, they're a little higher priced than testers, and their direction was not as clear, and we needed to formulate a new automation strategy. So I did not want them, and we needed to look at the whole entire view of an application, not just for one given sprint team. So that's what I did. Ownership of the automation solution. How many people are using the automation solution with the S word? The open source one. How many people are using, does everyone know what I'm talking about? Selenium? Yes. Quick tidbit, does anyone know how the word Selenium, how it came to being? You do? Anyone else? All right, then don't say a word. Now you can't present with me. You've been decommissioned here. Anyone else? Selenium? So selenium is a medical, not the only, but a medical cure for, so what was the big product prior to, in the 90s, 80s, everyone heard of the mercury products? Windrunner, Loadrunner. So selenium, so prior to HP buying mercury, so when it was the Windrunner days, selenium is a medical cure for mercury poisoning. So just by that, I'm not a developer by trade. I could read some code, so writing a Selenium class would be a little tough for me. But just by its very nature of that name, I have to love it. I have to absolutely love it. So just with that, how many people are using a commercial tool? Anything, whatever it is, commercial automation solution. No one? No way. There's got to be someone here. There's got to be. What are you using? Smart Bear. Okay.
Does that mean like no one's using Windrunner or Loadrunner?
Or QTP, UFT, Worksoft, Tricentis, Telerik, Silk. I could rattle off like 15 others. No one. Wow. That's all right. It's surprising. It's surprising that the numbers, but good for you if it's working in your environment. But you still own the solution, right? So who's owning the automation solution? So looking at the forums, looking at everything. So what kind of support do you have with Selenium? You have a forum. You go right and go blog or something, and maybe you get some kind of answer. So this is meaningless to you, this audience now. I was saying staying on top of product updates, releases, but no one's using a commercial tool. Wow. It's still like total ownership of the program. So what is automation? What's it going to do? What will it not do? Stories, writes the epics or stories. And acceptance criteria. Defining the criteria. So being the product owner for automation. That's definitely one key route that you can go without even being a programmer. All right, let's go into some technically oriented roles. It's probably, who's using a test management solution? This is probably the most natural fit for us. And all I'm going to do is looking here to say, you got the defined records. How are we configuring this? So maybe it's, if you have a little technical knack, you can help orient these a little bit more. All right, we can absolutely jump in to say we take ownership of that test management artifact because there's a lot now. You can see there's a lot of tools that come in here. And when I say alternate defect flows, that could be something like into Jira, into your TFS, if you're outside of, so there's a lot of integrations that it has to be. Operational manager. So this is one of my favorite slides. All right. Who has automation in their environment? Sprints embedded. Sprint 1 has automation work completed in Sprint 1. We all good? Sprint 2 has automation works built on Sprint 1. Sprint 3, built 1 and 2. Are we good so far? Now I'm going to throw a little zinger at you. What happens on Sprint 4 when something breaks? Is there time allocated to say, and it was something broken, some object got changed, and something's broken, the automation is not running. The existing automation is not running. What do we do with that? Or accumulate technical debt. Is there time enough to accumulate? Right? Let's get in the backlog. But this is where I've seen who's managing the change process for this, where's it fixed, and deployed the sprint teams. I haven't seen it, working for 2 different test automation vendors, I haven't seen it enough where there needs to be an operational test automation team. Everywhere every customer I've worked with, that's been the success criteria. And that's to say, someone who's providing the tune-ups, like, hey, you know what? I got to go on to Sprint 5. But Sprint 4 is broken and needs a little tweaks for these objects. Can you help do this? And so someone back on the side tuning it up and say, here you go. It's almost like a pit crew, you know, on a race. So it's the same kind of deal. If we don't have that, we're just accumulating technical debt. So this is where we really, really need that. Yes, sir?
So we have the phenomenon in spades where we're at.
Okay.
But the idea of there being like a special team that goes back and does the cleanup, to me, just falls apart at scale. It's like we push all of that back on the team. The automation comes from the team that wrote the feature, right? So you wrote the feature, you wrote your automation, you own your automation, and if 4 sprints down, a year down, whatever, some test is failing because you made a change, it's, you know, our team owns the automation system at large, and all the reporting and all things like that, but when the results come back, that such and such is failing, it goes back to that product team to deal with it.
And it might. So for one application team I have, they have 5, or one application has about 5 teams. So is that given, that could be used for other teams. So we're keeping a couple people off to the side. But I could certainly understand that approach, and that's part of the governance, if we want to have that. What about performance test strategies? Anyone doing performance test strategies in sprints? We talk about it. A lot of the vendors are talking about it, but I have yet to see people really doing that as a given thing, where you have sprints, where you have, now you're hardening the sprints with performance attributes. We talk about it, but we really haven't put this into practice yet as an industry. I don't know if anyone's going to disagree with that. By and large, if some people are, awesome. Then you're well ahead of the curve. But bottlenecks are identified in each sprint. So we can help devise this a little bit. We can continually doing performance tests. How many people do performance tests at the end? And then it just kills your schedule, where because now there's SQL that has to be updated, stored procedures have to be updated, and it's constant. Like, oh yeah, we're just going to allocate the last 2 weeks of our release to do performance testing. I hate to say it, that's pretty common. Additional infrastructure needs early. So we need more memory, we need more of this. If we need some of that, we can identify that a little earlier on. Again, code modifications made earlier. And finally, we talk about security testing. Who is doing good security testing as part of their QA effort? If I see one hand, I am going to stand on the table and give you a round of applause. Because I can tell you I don't. And I know we don't. But yeah, this is something that we keep. This is getting heavier and heavier each time. What are security implications in each sprint? Right? Are we looking at doing security testing as part of that? There may not be. So as we look at this, different things, your network security. So if we use this as kind of a given criteria, there may be areas that we kind of get involved with. This may not apply for each sprint. Yes, sir?
So we have a separate team for the system team.
Uh-huh.
On a sprint basis, on top of these non-functional tests, like performance tests and sprint tests.
Good. Yeah. And managed by QA manager? Excellent. So are all of these have to be accounted for in each sprint? Maybe not. But at least we're considering that. All right. Recap this. The quality and testing, I'm saying, largely belong to the PO in this world where they're owning for their given area in some cases. But that doesn't mean we're not contributing. I'm talking about extreme areas. If the quality manager still owns this, awesome. But who knows how long that's going to be. But in case we look at different areas, where's the value for the QA manager? So I gave 8 areas to consider for process-oriented, technical-oriented, a little bit of both, depending on where you want to go. Alignment is key. So the process-oriented, stay really tightly aligned with the product owners and scrum masters, where the technical-oriented stays close to the product vendors, but this group has no product vendors, so kind of a moot point. And then finally, embrace new roles as charter for the new career. So it's different. I mean, this is something that I'm working on too. I'm in this vein, and I'm working on this to be part of a new world, because it is different. I ask you, go look at different jobs. Go look at QA manager jobs and look at all the hands-on experience that they're asking for compared to yesterday. All right? So with that, thank you for attending. Have a great rest of the conference. And have a good day. Thank you. Oh yeah, I still got wow, I got 2 more minutes. Any general topics you want to talk about?
So one of the things, like you mentioned, the performance and the security, and I think the other horizontal here, included specialized. And so we don't treat that as we do have specialized groups for that that are largely supporting the rest of the product. We don't treat it as a QA team though. It's an engineering team. So security engineering, performance and engineering, and these guys write as much product code that supports the capability in the product to be more secure. As they provide testing support as well. So I think that's one of the trends that I see more with Agile.
It might be more. Yeah, exactly. And if I've seen it deployed, I've seen it in that capacity. Yeah. If it's being considered in an organization.
Yeah.
If it's not, then QA managers, let's jump on it. Leaders, let's jump on something that we could do. We could take some ownership of. I mean, that's the thing that it's really embracing something we could take ownership of, because I feel like the testing world has been, the testing aspect has not kind of been taken away from us as an ownership level in a lot of places. So it's just something to consider, other ways to go. Mr. Seahawk. Yes.
I like that name. So all of those slides about release management for our team don't exist because we are using CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. So we use Sonar and TFS to define our criteria. That's generally defined by the sprint team, but more so me, quality guy. And I'm not a quality manager. I'm just the embedded QA guy. So where exactly could a quality manager even be involved in that? I mean, that's owned completely by the sprint team.
On a CI process, if you're really doing CI, I don't know what kind of injections, because that's really a continuous review. And that's continuous. And this is kind of in the absence of something. I mean, I've seen some organizations do continuous integration, continuous deployment, but not as clear. So we have Jenkins in my company I'm at right now. Ask me how well we're using Jenkins. It's there. It's tool. We could configure it, but we're not disciplined enough to use it. So could a quality manager come in and help guide that release principle to at least get it off the ground? But if not, maybe that's not the best area for a QA manager to get, if it's already working.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't like CI/CD because it gets rid of a lot of people's jobs.
Right.
But it's super duper efficient.
It completely. I agree. All right, thanks guys.
All right.